Would you do your phone? Good. Well, it looks like everything's ready. We're here. Everyone on Zoom and my Facebook Live. So let's start our service. Welcome to the beloved community of Rivercrest Unitarian Universalist Congregation, both here in person and on Lovestream, Zoom, and Facebook Live. We celebrate all the ways we find to gather in this beloved community in body and in spirit as we go and grow and flow the riverway. I'm Kathy Jens-Rochow. My pronouns are she and her. You here in the room, we welcome you. You on Zoom or Facebook Live, we welcome you. However you made your way among us this morning, we welcome you. Let us pause together to enter into this time as we connect once again with each other and to the holy by any name, and the light of love within us all. Now, while we remain mindful that not everyone can breathe easy, nor find it easy to breathe, let's breathe here together. In this congregation, it is our mission to nurture our spirits, love intentionally, and create a just and healthy planet. In our enduring search for truth, meaning, and faith. What we share here is not an unchanging dogma, but an affirmation that we are called to be agents of love and justice, and to build a world where everyone is cherished for who they are. Now, Rev. Amy is on vacation on her summer break. She will be returning to the pulpit on August 25th. And as you see, our summer services are led by many of our lay members. The service today is about Jane Addams. Jane Addams lived her life on the side of love, her faith in action. Our reading this morning is an excerpt from a reflection by Reverend Fred Small. He's talking about being on the side of love. I'm not talking about sanctimony. I'm talking about intentionality. Understanding that our practice will be imperfect, just as we are, just as everyone is. So what is our purpose? What is our aspiration? What is our commitment? To side with love. When Unitarian Lydia Maria Child defied the prohibition of her time against women speaking out in public and demanded freedom for the enslaved African Americans and the vote for women, and when she protested the Trail of Tears, the brutal removal of the Cherokee, she was standing on the side of love. When Unitarian minister James Reeb heeded the call of Martin Luther King to Selma, Alabama, where he went but was bludgeoned to death by racists, he was standing on the side of love. Siding with love doesn't require power. It requires courage. And courage is power. When a child on a playground sticks up for another who's being bullied or made fun of because they're different, that child is also siding with love. Siding with love affirms the full humanity of all people. It honors the inherent worth and dignity, the spark of diverse divine in each and every one of us. Now, if you will, rise in body and spirit and join in singing our opening hymn, just as long as I have breath. The words will be projected on the screen. Chalice is a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition, a beacon of religious liberty, shining through the generations, now ours to hold high. As we light the chalice together, let us join our voices with these words. Do this first. We light our chalice as a symbol of the light within us and the life that flows through the world around us. It is our beacon as we search for truth. It is the warmth of our hearts for love. It is the energy that propels us to action. May we be kindled by our flame together. And in the light of love, let us renew our covenant as we say together, love is the spirit of this congregation, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de nuestra congregación y el servicio su ley principal. Esta es nuestra gran promesa, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad a través del amor y ayudarnos mutuamente. You can sing along.
Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the power that won't be stopped. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Well, you say that your heart has been turned to stone. You say that you want to be left alone. You said love has only made you even more. Well, let me tell you something that you know in your bones. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the power that won't be stopped. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Well, you say that your soul is like a dry river bed. Stop waiting for the water long ago, you said. You better pray on that for the rain instead. 'Cause love comes a tidal wave over your head. Come on, love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the power that won't be stopped. Love is the water that wears down the rock. You say that waiting for love takes too long. It dulls the sharp mind and weakens the strong. Well, you may be right, but you may be wrong. 'Cause love can make a mountain come tumbling down. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the power that won't be stopped. Love is the water that wears down the rock. I say love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the power that won't be stopped. Love is the water that wears down the rock.
In our community each week, we share the pieces of our lives. We take a moment to share our joys, sorrows, and gratitudes here with the people we love, exactly who we are, where we are right now. Here in the room, I'll read from this book. If you're on Zoom and would like to share a thought, a prayer, a joy, or a concern, write it in the chat and we'll lift those up together. Candle of memory is lit for Ruth Westheim, Life Well Lived. And that's from Rebecca's here, nothing in the chat. Give her another minute if somebody wants to add in the chat. So now, in the quiet of this hour, if there's something on your mind and heart that you wish to mark without words, You are invited to come forward and drop a stone of reflection into the water as we hold each other in sacred communion. For as William James wrote, we're like islands in the sea, separate on the surface, but connected in the deep. We live these things, both spoken and unspoken, written and unwritten, asking that our hearts be seen as we are seers of hearts, that we may serve one another and those beyond our walls with love and thankfulness today and every day. Amen. Amin. Aho Hashem. Namaste. Blessed be. And so it is. Now, our heritage. This morning we mark our heritage and celebrate the life and work of Jane Addams. That's Jane Addams with 2 D's. Very early in her life, Jane Addams realized the unfairness that limited the lives and livelihood of the disadvantaged people in the late 1800s, which led to her becoming one of the most beloved and disliked women of her day. She worked to create a more peaceful, fair world for all people, no matter their race, color, nationality, or gender. Along her journey, Addams co-founded the Hull House, the most celebrated community settlement house in the United States. She became a motivational author, speaker, and women's rights and peace advocate. She worked tirelessly on community, state, and national levels to promote women's rights, workers' rights, and children's rights. And she spoke passionately against the evils of war. No one, not millionaires, not presidents, not the FBI, could stand in the way of her quest for justice. Addams became the first woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Her writing and teaching and actions were based on the belief, and this is a quote from her, "Without the advance and improvement of the whole, no man can count for any lasting improvement in his own moral and material individual condition." This is our heritage. Now, here in our times, we find our hope in the UUA's leadership training programs, Thrive Young Adult and Thrive Youth. The Thrive Young Adult and Thrive Youth training programs bring together Unitarian Universalist young people of color, people of African American descent, Caribbean, Native American, Asian, and Pacific Islander, Latino, and Hispanic, Middle East, Arab, and multiracial, to deepen their faith, to nourish their spirits, and to build critical skills for leadership in the face of our uncertain, broken, and beautiful world. This is our hope. Now we sustain and strengthen the beloved community and its work in this world through the gifts of our time, talent, and treasure. Each Sunday, 25% of our undesignated funds offering goes to LifeNet for Families, which is an organization that provides meals, clothing, and support for people in need in Broward County. Usher, would you come forward?
Broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we go walk it out. Walk it out.
thank you for these generous gifts. Now, Maureen's going to read the wisdom story. And Xander, you can sit in one of the chairs because she's going to be up here and read it, okay? Sit here in the front so you can see the slides. Yeah, you're going to watch the slides. Aw,
Do you want me to be over? I can be in that chair, Xander.
You want to sit over there in a minute.
It's Xander's choice today.
Can you see the slides? Yeah, okay.
The house that Jane built, a story about Jane Addams. A house stands on a busy street. Its doors are opened wide. To all that come, it bids good cheer. To some it says, abide. Jane Addams. In 1889, a wealthy young woman named Jane Addams moved into a lovely, elegant house in Chicago, Illinois. But instead of moving into a lovely, elegant neighborhood, she picked a house that was smack in the middle of one of the filthiest, poorest parts of town. Why would a wealthy young woman do this when she could have lived anywhere? Jane was just 6 years old when she went on a trip with her father and noticed that not everyone lived like her family did. She vowed that one day she would live right in the midst of horrid little houses and find a way to fix the world. Jane was a strong soul from the start, and she was brave. When she and her stepbrother George were young, they would sneak away at night to explore nearby caves. Once, Jane lowered George over a cliff on a rope to spy on an owl in its nest. Jane was smart. She read and read from her father's book collection, which doubled as the town's library. Most girls did not go to college then, but Jane's father believed that women should be educated. She went to Rockford Female Seminary and graduated at the top of her class. But when school was over, she wasn't sure what to do with her life. And that same summer, her father died. Jane was lost. About 2 years later, she and her friends traveled to Europe. They went to the theater, the opera, and many beautiful places. But then, Jane saw something in London she couldn't forget. People in ragged clothes with outstretched hands, begging a cart vendor to buy his leftover fruits and vegetables. They were rotten, and they hadn't sold at market. The spoiled food was all they could afford. What could she do to help? Long after the trip was over, that question stuck in her mind. She remembered how she felt when she was 6. Jane traveled back to London to learn about a place she had heard was helping with the poor in a brand new way. At Toynbee Hall, the idea was to have rich and poor people living together in the same community. They could learn from each other. Instead of simply serving soup, for example, people could take cooking classes. Other skills were taught as well. Toynbee Hall was the first settlement house. It was called a settlement house because the well-off people who worked there during the day didn't go back to their own homes at night. Instead, they settled in and lived at Toynbee Hall, right in the same neighborhood as the needy. Jane now knew what to do. She told her friend Ellen Gates Starr about her plan to build a settlement house in Chicago. It was as if a racehorse had burst out of the gate free at last to pour every ounce of energy into running. There was a glittery side to Chicago, with its mansions, fancy shops, and sparkling lakefront. But there was a gritty side too. 1 million people lived in Chicago in 1889. Most were immigrants, people who came from other countries. They came for a better life, but they didn't speak English. That made it hard to find good jobs. They needed help. Jane found the perfect house. It had big rooms and high ceilings and marble fireplaces, and it was in one of the worst neighborhoods in the city. Garbage lay rotting in the streets, piled high. Large families were cramped into tiny, ramshackle houses with no running water. The smell from the backlot outhouses hung in the air. Rough boys ran in the street, stirring up trouble because they had nothing to do. The house belonged to Charles J. Hull, and he had left it to a wealthy cousin named Helen Culver. At first, Jane paid rent. But after she told Helen what she had in mind, Helen gave her the house for free. In thanks, Jane named it Hull House. Jane moved in on September 18, 1889. The very first night, she was so busy and excited that she forgot to lock a side door before going to sleep. But no one broke in. She decided to leave Hull House unlocked from then on so people would know they could come in at any time. People who didn't have enough to eat, or had no shoes on their feet, or had just lost a job, began to find their way to Hull House. Of course, it wasn't always peaceful. Once a couple of boys threw rocks at the house and broke a window. Instead of getting upset, Jane took it as a sign to give the neighborhood kids something to do. She had her own way of looking at things. Another time, Jane discovered a man in the house looking for something to steal. He tried to jump out a window to escape, but she showed him the door so he wouldn't get hurt. When he broke in a second time, she asked him why. He said he was out of work and had no money. Jane told him to report back in the morning. When he did, she gave him a job. Jane spent her own money running Hull House and asked other well-off people to donate too. She did not want to be paid for working there. Even when people gave her gifts, she gave them away. Her friends teased Jane about this. One friend gave her new underwear with her initials just so Jane couldn't pass them on. But she did. Any problem Jane discovered, she tackled. No running water meant no easy way to bathe, and this led to sickness. So Jane put in a public bath, and people flocked to it, which helped her convince city officials they needed to build more public baths. No safe place for children to play? Jane talked a wealthy man into giving her a lot he owned near Hull House. Workmen tore down the shabby buildings and turned the lot into a playground. It was the first one in Chicago. Little kids home alone because their parents had to work 14 hours a day? Jane started a morning kindergarten and after-school clubs. She also set up afternoon classes for older kids who had to go to work during the school day. Jane did not do this all alone. Ellen Gates Starr was her partner from the start. Many other smart, generous people moved into Hull House and helped. They taught literature, art, English, math, science, and cooking. Soon there was not just one building, but two, then 3, and 4, and more. By 1907, Hull House had grown into 13 buildings, including a gymnasium, coffee house, theater, music school, community kitchen, and an art gallery. By the early 1920s, more than 9,000 people a week visited Hull House. The house that Jane built brought all kinds of people together and helped those in need. It changed a bad neighborhood into a great and strong community. Hull House transformed the lives of all who stepped inside. Today, every community center in America, in large part, has Jane Addams to thank. With all that she did, both inside and outside the house that Jane built, her childhood wish to fix the world came true.
And Xander, it's up to you if you want to leave or stay, you're welcome to. Okay. We could make an effort to sing him out, right? We love you and bless you and send you on your way. We love you and bless you today and every day. The title of my message today is The Most Dangerous Woman in the United States. Yes, Jane Addams, one of our Universalist heroes, was labeled the most dangerous woman in the U.S. for her unrelenting work for social justice. She took on corrupt city officials, the court system, the state legislature, the labor industry, and even the president. Known best for her establishment of Hull House in Chicago, she was also responsible for changing child labor laws, the creation of juvenile court, eliminating sweatshops, and so much more. She was an abolitionist, a suffragette, and a pacifist. Even though it was unpopular, she was very outspoken in her opposition to the U.S. entering into World War I. Now, as mentioned in the story, while she was on a trip to London, Jane witnessed a distressing scene late at night. Masses of people bidding on rotten vegetables that the merchants couldn't sell to anybody else. The scene haunted Addams as she traveled through Europe, and she hoped to find ways to ease that suffering. She also visited Toynbee Hall, the London settlement, and resolved to replicate this in the United States. So on September 18th, 1889, Jane Addams and her partner, Ellen Starr, moved into the second floor of a rundown mansion in Chicago's West Side, nestled between a saloon and a morgue. From the outset, they imagined Hull House as a center for higher civic and social learning. Addams, Starr, and several other like-minded individuals lived and worked among the poor, establishing, among other things, art classes, discussion groups, after-school groups, cooperatives, a kindergarten, a coffee house, a lending library, an art gallery, and a gymnasium. Hull House was a precursor to our now current day community centers. And at its peak, 9,000 visitors a week. There were 13 people living there. They weren't all women, too. 7 of them were men. Now, Addams was joined with very many notable social justice advocates. She and her team of Hull House residents worked together for many social justice issues. Now, at that time, West Side of Chicago was the poorest and the most crowded in the city. Most buildings had no running water, indoor plumbing, and although they were supposed to have bi-weekly garbage pickup, that almost never happened. Now, Chicago was notorious for corrupt politicians, along with New York City, sort of thing. The mayor had appointed one of his cronies as head of the sanitation department, and that person did not feel the need to clean up the West Side. So Addams placed a bid for the contract of picking up the garbage, proposing herself as the head and vowing to drive the garbage wagon herself, which she had to. She didn't get the contract, but it motivated the head of the department to have more pickup in the neighborhood. So she and her cronies followed the garbage wagons to make sure they picked up everything, and then took them completely to the dump. So within a year, the streets and alleys were clean. Now, notable among the social justice advocates residing at Hull House, there was Julia Lathrop. Julia Lathrop quickly became involved in Hull House activities, including being a volunteer for Chicago Charities Board. Now, her work in this charity board came to the attention of Reform Governor John P. Altgeld, and thus she became the first resident of Hull House to receive a state position on the Illinois Board of Charities. So, being part of that board, she traveled and visited a number of facilities across the state. She discovered that people who were ill, mentally ill, aged, sick, or disabled were all housed together. She advocated for separate housing for them. Now, she also toured the Chicago jails and discovered that boys as young as 12 were imprisoned along with adult criminals. These boys had been arrested for things like petty theft and loitering. When they went to court, they were fined. And unfortunately, the parents couldn't pay that fine. So the kids went to jail. Adams petitioned to make sure that the children under 18 had a separate facility if they had to be jailed. And she also worked to create the first juvenile court, where children were put on probation rather than sent to jail. Now, these first juvenile probation officers were women who also visited the homes to help establish a better environment. These women were the first social service case managers. And when the National Children's Board was established, President Taft appointed Lathrop as a chief, the first woman to be a bureau chief in the federal government. Another notable was Florence Kelly, who was a social and political reformer. Her work against sweatshops for minimum wage, 8-hour work days, and children's rights is widely regarded today. She championed to establish a minimum age for child workers and the 40-hour work week. And she was key in the Illinois legislation to get a Workers' Compensation Act passed. And part of this dynamic team was Dr. Alice Hamilton. With Adam, she created a well-being clinic at Hull House. The mothers soon asked if she could treat their husbands. Many were ill, and several suffered from what was called drop hand. The hands, similar to drop foot, could not work. So she researched it, she looked at workplaces, and determined that the cause was lead poisoning. So she worked for cleaner workplace, protective gear for the workers, and her work led to improvements in safety and regulations. And she's sometimes credited with leading the founding of the United States OSHA. She also became the first woman professor at Harvard. Now, this work revolving around the workplace safety and child labor made many people angry. Not just the bosses, but also the parents, because they depended on that meager child's income to make ends meet. At one time, a wealthy manufacturer offered Hull House $50,000 if they would just stop this work. Now, can $50,000 today would be a great donation, let alone in early 1900s. Although it was sorely needed, it was, of course, rejected. Now, Jane Addams was also making headlines on her own. As she worked for social justice reform, she realized that without the vote, women didn't have much power to push for reform. They always had to have the men present things and stand beside them as they talked about their issues. So in 1906, she joined the women's suffrage movement and became one of their popular motivational speakers. Now, Adam's father was very key in her life growing up. He was an abolitionist. Their house was a stop on the Underground Railroad. And their home, Adams joined the Civil Rights Movement, and she became one of the founders of the NAACP. Now, raised Quaker, Adams was a pacifist, and she spoke out against the U.S. entering World War I. And this was not a popular stand to take. J. Edgar Hoover initialized a treason investigation against her, calling her the most dangerous woman in the U.S. Jane decided to leave Hull's house in capable hands and left the United States for 6 years, where she felt safer. She remained outspoken against the war, and in 1931 she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, when she returned to the U.S., she retired from Hull House and lived with her life partner, Mary Rosa Smith. If there ever was a prime example of someone living their faith, Jane Addams is it. It almost makes me exhausted to list all the things she was involved in, and I just touched the surface on this. She also believed in religious freedom and bringing all people of all faiths into social life. One exception was her loved Christmas party, which, of course, she separated the religious from the social and had a Christmas party. She firmly believed in the equality of people, regardless of gender, immigration status, and language. So, Jane Addams is my UU hero. Now, please rise in body and spirit and join with the video, singing O Long Hesedi Bonet. Here at River Grass, we offer many ways to live our Unitarian Universalist faith in action. You'll find them in our weekly email, our Facebook page, and our website, riverofgrassuu.org. Here are some upcoming events and opportunities to fulfill the mission and the vision of this congregation, and other announcements for the life of this beloved community. Rather indicative of our summer downtime, we only have one announcement. The Spiritual Art Group has finished one banner. Come this Saturday at 2 p.m. at A9, and help finish creating the other 5. All of the drawing and prep work is done. We will be painting part of the images. All we'll do is paint between the lines. So Steve Jens-Rochow at spiritualart@riverofgrassuu.org. Our closing words are written by Sherry Woodbury. Love is the center and foundation. Let us ground ourselves here in our highest values. Love is the center and the foundation of this faith. Love is the power that holds us together as community. Let us open our hearts to the healing power of liberating love. Because love is not only something we receive, it's something we practice in community. Let us be accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values. As we continue to listen and learn, to act and grow, may each unfold in wholeness, both deeply loving and truly loved. As we extinguish the flame of our chalice, we ignite it inside of us. Our commitment to our mission and to one another is an unquenchable flame. Let us remember that we are not alone until we light this flame again. In these changing times, let us be all the more vigilant to hold before us the vision of a world transformed and dare to transform ourselves to make it so. Till we meet again, shine on.